We'll give everyone a minute to get connected. Welcome. All right. Oh, I think one more person's still getting connected. We'll wait 1 second. Jackie Piper, are you connected on audio? I think we're waiting. Just give us 1 second, everyone. Welcome. All right, well, we will go ahead and get started. We want to be mindful of everyone's time. We thank you for joining the Osteosarcoma Institute's Grant Cycle Info session. It will be led by myself, Chelsea Blanks. I'm the operations manager here at the OSI. My colleague, Amy, the scientific programs manager. Dr. Lee Hellman, the director at the OSI, and then Dr. Chand Khanna, the chair of the Strategic Advisory Board. The four of us will be leading the presentation and answering any questions that you may have. So feel free to send any questions in the chat or unmute yourself and ask if one comes up, or save it till the end. We'll have time at the end for questions as well. So feel free, whichever one is more pertinent to what you're thinking, we're happy to ask. And we also want to point everyone to the entirety of the grant cycle application instructions document that can be found on our website. I will put this link in the chat right now to make it as easy as possible for everyone. And then I will also be going through, we will be going through with a screen share of this document. But this truly is the all-encompassing details of our letters of intent and full proposal grant cycle process here at the Osteosarcoma Institute. So it is very detailed, it is very thorough, and so we encourage you to read it in its entirety before submitting a letter of intent on Proposal Central. And I will start by just kind of giving everyone an overview of the Osteosarcoma Institute, and then I'll pass it off to my colleagues here, and we will get things started. All right, we are so glad to have you. Thank you for joining us. Let me share my screen and we will kick things off. All right, so this is the grant cycle application instructions document, and this contains some of the high-level information about the process and deadlines. And so I want to call your attention to our letter of intent deadline. That is October 31st at 4 p.m. Eastern, and everything must be submitted through Proposal Central. We'll do a quick Proposal Central walkthrough if you are unfamiliar with that portal, and feel free to ask any questions if those come up. The email that you are going to want to use for any questions or additional information is our submissions inbox. So submissions@osinst.org can be found right on this document as well. We have a table of contents. Feel free, this jumps you to exactly where you want to go. And then I'm going to share a little bit about the Osteosarcoma Institute overview and start with our mission statement. So the OSI, that's what we call ourselves. The OSI's mission is to dramatically increase treatment options and survival rates in osteosarcoma patients through identifying and funding the most promising and breakthrough osteosarcoma clinical trials and science. The Osteosarcoma Institute was founded in 2017 with the goal of improving the outcomes of patients with osteosarcoma. I'm not going to read the entire thing, just giving you some high-level tidbits to take note of. The OSI is a science-driven organization whose strategy is guided by its active and engaged Strategic Advisory Board, chaired by Dr. Chand Khanna, of preeminent physicians and other researchers from academia and industry. In pursuit of its mission, the OSI employs a multifaceted strategy in which grant funding plays an important role. We have 4 specific grant programs that we will talk about in more detail here shortly. Those are our clinical trials, our correlative studies, preclinical and translational studies, and then our high-risk, high-impact program. So additionally, as of when this was written a few weeks ago, the OSI has committed $6.5 million toward a comprehensive portfolio of 14 funded studies. We maintain a high level of involvement and accountability with our grantees through regular and rigorous progress reporting. Again, I want to highlight that the deadline for letter of intent submission is October 31st, 2024 by 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Proposal Central. You're going to hear me say that about 17 times, so you will hopefully not forget. Lee, I will pass it over to you to go through the specific programs and share a bit more about those 4 programs.
Sure. Thank you, Chelsea. And I'm just going to be very brief, and please, if you have any questions, and we'll go back into a little bit more detail, because this is really for you guys. So first, I'll talk about our clinical trials. Really, we're looking for phase 1, 2, or simply phase 2 studies that are focused on metastatic or recurrent osteosarcoma. We know now pretty clearly that patients that have measurable disease after recurrence have a progression-free survival of 4 months. And so that gives us a very easy way to measure a potential activity. So something that we might be interested in pursuing further. And so we're really looking for studies trying to move that needle, because once patients recur, they do extremely poorly. And these are mainly, we're not talking about resected patients after a pulmonary recurrence, but patients that have measurable metastatic disease. The focus, we really want this to be scientifically driven clinical trial, answering what you think is an important question that hasn't been answered yet, with strong preclinical rationale, as I mentioned, by needing a strong scientific rationale. Clearly, a good clinical trial design, a reasonable budget. We'll come back to this, but we know we can't fund everything because clinical trials are expensive. Our budget for a 2 to 3 year clinical trial that we can provide is $800,000. We'll come back to that later. So we're looking for maybe where you have the ability to leverage other financial support to get the study done, other philanthropic support. And it seems to me I left. We're not going to fund building infrastructure. We're happy if there's existing infrastructure. You can do it as a single institution study. We're happy to have it be a multiple institution study, but we can't fund the infrastructure to support a multi-institution study. Hopefully that infrastructure exists. So I'm going to just stop right there and ask if there are any questions before I move into the correlative science. Seeing no hands, nothing has popped up, Chelsea. Okay. So I'll move on quickly to the correlative science. So this was sort of a newer, I think it was our 3rd grant type that we developed. And this is really looking for proposals that are tied to a clinical trial to generate data on understanding if you have a target, for example, and how you measure is the drug hitting the target, those kinds of things, but it's really directly tied to a clinical trial. And we're not funding the clinical trial with a correlative science study. We want to see new biology generated. Really the ideal correlative science study would have a power analysis demonstrating that the number of samples you have can answer the specific question you're trying to answer. And even if a study is negative in the clinic and you have scientific data that might point you to why that was negative, that's important. It's important to understand that. So those are the kinds of things. And we want to make sure that if you're proposing to do a correlative study using circulating tumor DNA, that whoever's proposing it has the ability and can show that they have the ability to do the proposed studies that they are hoping to get funding for. And that budget ranges from $200,000 to $500,000. That's over 2 years. Any questions about that one? Right? Everything's clear.
John, go ahead and take it away with preclinical translational.
Great, thank you. So thank you all for joining, and I'm not gonna sort of share too much about what's ready written, and we've done a lot of work to polish these documents so that they're clear for you. But in the preclinical, I would say that preclinical and translational means a lot of different things to different people. And what we mean is not clinical trials. So the work necessary to get to a clinical trial or to form a hypothesis about translation to a clinical trial. But we understand that foundational research is needed to get there, and we will prioritize the best science in this category of studies to get knowledge to eventually develop a clinical rationale trial to advance in patients with this disease. So that's the preclinical and translational. Again, very brief introduction. A lot of this is written, but happy to answer any questions. From foundational research through to true drug studies in preclinical models. So I'll move on unless there are questions there.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
I just want to ask, we have our target IGF-2R, so we published several papers in the mice and also looked at some safety in dogs. But like for moving it towards the clinic, we would like to refine our mouse model to make more realistic estimates of future patient doses and also the safety, because ours is a radioactive drug. So will that kind of proposal fall under preclinical translational as OSI understands it? And my second very small question is that letter of intent, it will be only, I mean, after it's submitted, then you will just invite certain people?
We'll get to the letter of intent after.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so yeah, then
To
that's the first
answer, to answer your first question, I think, at the high level, what you're describing for your IGF-2 based therapy would fall in this category. Certainly does not sound like it falls into the clinical trial category.
Not yet.
You may want to build around the correlatives, but it certainly sounds like it would fit in this category.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Hannan. Thank you.
And
Dr.
remember, I'm
Antini,
from
did you have a
Saskatoon.
question?
Yeah, there was another question.
No, thank you. I actually got the answer by listening to the answer to the previous question. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, and Dr. Dadakova, you remember that I'm from Saskatoon.
I do remember you're from Saskatoon. Yes, you graduated from that Western College of
Yes.
Veterinary Medicine. I do.
Yeah, well, good to see you again.
Right,
So I'll
great.
move on to the next category unless there are following questions. So this next category is a new one for us, 1 year under our belt. I'm personally very excited about it. And the idea is that we have, I think, done a good job of defining what high risk is in research. And we have taken an approach to de-risk the entry into life sciences research by removing the barrier of preliminary data from the grant review process. And rather than requiring depth in preliminary data as is commonly required, we've moved to progress reports that will gate the continuation of the studies in the process of doing the research. In fairness to the process, we don't yet have a specific definition for high impact, but the desire is to really move the needle. So creative ideas is what we're looking for. Ideas that would not potentially fall under one of the other categories. And there's text describing this already, but we're clear on what high risk is and how we want to embrace high risk by removing the requirements for preliminary data. But be careful as you propose the research to realize that that requires a grant funding process that you can deliver on by having tranches of money delivered over the grant life cycle. Any questions about high risk and high impact?
I do actually have a question regarding this, Dr. Khanna. So I think Dr. Weiss and I, University of Pittsburgh, received actually this grant and we are about to report our final reports. And Amy, by the way, we are in the process. And we were able to actually submit another one as we were able to collect enough data to submit another one. But in the event that the other one needs more time to be funded, which is possible because it's going to be reviewed by the end of October, we don't know. This is our first cycle. So perhaps we're going to get back comments. We're going to have to work on it. And we're going to have to generate new data eventually to resubmit. So can we ask for funding extension and additional funds on this mechanism?
You can. I think that just
Well, first of all, wait, John. First of all, you did not get a high risk, high impact grant.
I was just going to
You
say
got
that.
a discretionary grant. Were you going to say that, John? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
I apologize. Okay, so that was a discretionary. I interpreted as an impact, high impact. Yes, it was a discretionary.
Yeah, so that fell outside of this, but in the same setting of your reaching out for discretionary funding, what you're describing, I think, could be through the same process as in reaching out again to us for discretionary funds or for small gap funding. But by the same token, if where you are leaves you a gap to where you want to go, and you don't have preliminary data that would merit the grant under a traditional basis or under one of the other awards, it would be reasonable for us to consider that work here again.
Yeah, but I would gather if you had enough data to submit an R01, you have plenty of preliminary data. So what you're really asking is, if that isn't funded, is there some kind of a bridge funding to generate more data? So I think that's very individual, and I think it's not really relevant for this talk. And we'll see. And
Probably part of a discussion that we would have, like we did with the discretionary.
That's a separate discussion, not really part of not intended for this. But I would imagine if you submitted an R01, you have plenty of preliminary data, so it would not be a high risk, high reward either. So let's see, and you can always call us and we can talk to you in the future.
Thank you.
Good luck.
That's
Good luck on your R01.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any additional questions about the high risk, high impact program for Dr. Khanna? Going to take silence as no, so we'll move on. I'm going to pass it over to Amy to kind of go over the general instructions for all of our grant programs. This is eligibility, guidelines, terms, things of that nature. So Amy, I'll let you take it from here. Again, there is a lot of information on this document. She's only going to pick up a couple of key points. We highly encourage you, strongly encourage you to read it in its entirety to ensure that you and your institution are eligible for funding. Amy, you there?
There we go. I pressed it once. There we go. Great. Thank you all for being here today. So I will just go through. I'm not going to read this by any means in its entirety, but as Chelsea mentioned, our two-stage process, which begins with the LOI and then concludes with a full proposal, if you are invited following the LOI stage to submit a full proposal. And you can see the application deadlines and review timelines below with the letter of intent. I will say it one more time, October 31st at 4 p.m. Eastern time. And then the letter of intent decisions will be communicated in February. And then if you are invited at that time in February to submit a full grant application, those will be due on April 1st, again, 4 p.m. Eastern time. We do not accept any applications that come after that time. So please make sure that if there are any issues with Proposal Central or you haven't used it before, that you plan ahead accordingly for all of those documents to be submitted by the deadline. Just the eligibility criteria down below are pretty straightforward. However, I will just highlight, because we do get questions from time to time about whether, for-profit companies can request a grant, even if it's a small, startup biotech that came from an academic institution. The answer to that is no. You do need to be a nonprofit charitable institution, or if you happen to be a company, you do need to have a collaboration with an academic institution where the PI will be and where the work will be done. So that is an absolute requirement. We are not, as a 501c3, able to fund for-profit entities. Additionally, you do not need to be a United States citizen. You can see the equivalent faculty appointments down below. And research projects can be an extension of ongoing research that you're doing, but there cannot be any overlap of funding that you have already received for that research. So if you have another foundation grant, you have NIH support, it cannot be any overlapping support for that project. Also, one thing that is slightly different this year than in prior years, if you have applied, is that you are only allowed to submit one letter of intent. So let's say you have a clinical trial that you're interested and you have a preclinical, you got to pick the best one that you think would merit funding. So only one LOI across all 4 programs. And then just some of these down below really get to the point of, if you are selected for funding, how we will publicize the grant and needing photos for that. Again, applications received after the due date will not be considered, and as well as your project needs to fall within our mission of the Osteosarcoma Institute that Chelsea mentioned before. And if you are planning to resubmit an application that you've already submitted, you may only submit that reapplication one time. And then thereafter, if you'd like to apply through our grant process, it needs to be a different project than what you have previously submitted for funding. Any questions before we move on to?
There's a question in the
yes.
chat from.
Oh, great, thank you.
Zalecki. So Dr. Zalecki, I think that the answer to your question regarding medicinal chemistry project, it could fall into either of the 2 categories, but strategically you would decide based on the availability of preclinical data, whether the bigger grant, which would be the preclinical and translational, would be more likely for you to be successful, or the smaller grant, which is the high risk, high impact. So I think it really depends on how much preliminary data you have.
Yeah, thank you. It is at a very early stage, so we don't have a lot of data.
Yeah, so if that's the case, and you can
High risk, high reward. Yeah, thank you.
can describe the impact, then it would probably fall into the high impact category.
Thank you.
And then I do see one other question about, is one LOI per PI as the main applicant only? Can one PI submit one LOI as the main applicant and be a co-applicant on a second LOI application? I'll let Dr. Hellman, Dr. Khanna.
I would say yes.
Comment on that.
We've really seen that happen, but you know,
Right.
if you're just an investigator on another grant, yeah, you're not submitting the grant, so that's okay.
Any other questions before we move on? Okay, keep it going, Amy.
All right, so one of the other common questions that we receive also is regarding indirect costs. And I hope that we've spelled this out pretty clearly this year in revising how we state this, but indirect costs cannot exceed 10% of the total funding. Indirect costs cannot be 10%. It's inclusive. Your total grant application is inclusive of those 10% indirects. So it's not $500,000 plus 10% indirects. It is inclusive of the indirects in your total application of, let's say, $500,000. That one we tend to get a lot of questions about.
This is by far our most specific question. So please read it, make sure it makes sense. If you have a question, reach out, but this is what we get the most questions about with wording. So please read it and ensure that you understand how it is worded.
And then additionally, we do not utilize the modified total direct cost base. I know that's used in other grant applications, NIH, we do not utilize that. So It's just your direct costs and your indirect costs.
Yeah, just to be very clear, if you have a maximum grant total of if we give $500,000, that's the money we have to give. It's not like we have that plus another, 80,000. I mean, I wish we could fund more, but we're, relatively growing institute, and, we have the money that we say we have. So what is said as the total amount the grant is, that includes everything.
Correct.
Thank you, Lee. Go ahead,
Make it
Amy.
simple. That's what we have to do.
Yes. All right, so as Chelsea alluded to at the very beginning, we utilize Proposal Central, which I'm sure many of you have used before. If you have not, you will need to create a user ID login and can access just simply by searching Osteosarcoma Institute, and should see all 4 of our programs there. I do want to call attention to that Proposal Central is best utilized with Google Chrome and Mozilla Firefox. So if you're using Safari, I would highly encourage you to utilize one of these browsers when accessing Proposal Central, as that is where they work or where Proposal Central works the best. Okay. And you can figure out how to find the grants from there. In terms of formatting, very specific that your documents need to be in Calibri or Times New Roman with a minimum of 11-point font and no smaller than 9-point font for figures and tables. The project description, which you will find in Proposal Central as one of the attachment templates, must be submitted in the order that you see it in the template on Proposal Central. So we encourage you to just follow each one of those sections, input your data. It's a Word document, so you can certainly, manipulate it very easily, but it needs to be in the order in which you see on that template, as well as the pages should be numbered consecutively as well. And lastly, if you have any problem with Proposal Central, with the system itself, not with, our anything related to our application instructions here, there are the contacts for you of getting in contact with Proposal Central. And then again, as Chelsea alluded to, our email, should you have any questions about the process, submissions@osinst.org.
Thank you, Amy.
Any questions there? Okay.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add, as someone who's used
Sure.
Proposal Central for years and years, they're pretty good. I mean, if you have a technical problem, don't call us, call Proposal Central, because they're the ones, and they're really responsive, I have to say. I've had many
Their
technical
support
problems.
team typically responds within an hour. So if you
Yeah,
are having a
they're
technical
really,
issue,
yeah.
we encourage you to reach out to their team.
And I would also say, as from personal experience, don't use Safari. It just doesn't work on Proposal Central.
All right, Dr.
And Chelsea, can you just scroll back up really quick just to that? We don't need to spend a lot of time here, but this is in terms of, just up a little bit more. There we go. So this is just a summary of the grant agreement terms. This is by no means the contract, and this will only come into play if you receive a grant from the organization. But we did want to make these terms made known right from the beginning, particularly as it relates to the reporting and particularly the funding schedule, as Chan mentioned, for the high risk, high impact, which is the grant dollars are given in a different format than our normal funding. So just review that, but that won't come into play at the LOI stage.
Thank you, Amy. Dr. Hellman, I'll pass it off to you to dive into more details on the clinical trials letter of intent instructions.
Yeah. So I think we went through, no one seemed to have any questions about what we're looking for. But just to be clear, you have for the clinical trial LOI, you have 10 full pages. And that include and if there are a number of sections that have to be included, they're all written there. Can you scroll to the? Oh yeah, I'm looking at mine. Yeah. So you know, in 10 pages, you have to have your rationale, your hypothesis, your objectives. I mean, like any grant, right? Your hypothesis, your specific aims, inclusion criteria, exclusion criteria, summary, how you're going to handle the data monitoring, the trial sites and labs that you're going to use, all the things, as well as your budget summary. And in the last two, 13 and 14, a summary of other anticipated funding support. And that's always helpful. As I said, $800,000 often doesn't cover a 2-year clinical trial, as you all probably know. So it'd be, you know, if you have the potential to have other sources of funding, we're not only going to fund something that we're the only ones that can, that are funding it. So we're happy to collaborate with other funders. And then, of course, your the references. And then you can see below that 10, that's the 10 pages.
The references are included in the 10 pages, just to clarify that.
Everything from 1 to 14 is in those 10 pages.
Yep.
And then in addition, you can see other entries that don't come under the 10 pages. That includes a bio sketch, a project description that's in lay terms.
No, this
no,
is
sorry.
1 through 14. This is the submission in the 1 through 14.
Oh,
Yep.
sorry.
That's okay. It's an attachment. You're good.
That's okay, but it's still okay. A bio sketch. And so those are separate that you include but you can see the majority of and they all have to be in there. So it's pretty straightforward. I think we've worked over the last 3 years to make it as clear as possible. And I will say it really often, is a question about, is $500,000 and then we add indirects. So I hope we've made that clear. But I think if you just read the instructions carefully and follow the directions, it should be pretty clear.
Thank you, Dr. Hellman.
Any questions about that? Can I just ask a question? How have most of you used Proposal Central? Can you guys just put up your hands if you've used Proposal Central?
No.
So there's a lot of people that haven't.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you're gonna, if you want to submit, you're gonna have to go on Proposal Central and set up a name
Profile.
so you can access it. You have to have a profile in Proposal Central. So I would recommend, if you're really thinking about submitting, to do that anyway. And then you have that, and that actually helps you pretty easily scroll through and look at the different pages and how it's set up. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Hellman. I also want to note that on this grant application instructions document, we do provide the details for the full proposal. We're just not going over that today because it really is a focus of the letter of intent that is due in October. But the information that is expected in the full proposal is on that document as well. And we encourage you to review that additionally. Dr. Khanna, I'll pass it over to you to go over our 3 other programs and take it from there.
Yeah, well, I think that as Lee said, if you are careful and read the document, it's pretty clear. The main difference from what Lee suggested for the clinical and this one is the length. The preclinical grants are 5 pages inclusive of the 8 points listed here. It is again Proposal Central, and I think otherwise pretty clear in the document. But if anyone has questions, happy to. If you have questions, other people probably do, but please do read the document. Amy and Chelsea put a lot of time into putting this together, and we actually just met to discuss the fact that it's pretty clear, more clear than most granting application processes. So please do review it. in advance of your application.
And maybe I'll just add, if 5 pages seems scanty, remember, this is just an LOI. And when reviewers see that, they're looking for, does this look interesting? And does it make sense? And is it relevant to our problems we have in improving our outcomes with osteosarcoma?
Good point,
So
Dr.
5
Hall.
pages
And
works.
I'll just make one quick mention about the BioSketch. We do follow the NIH BioSketch template. So it's the same thing, but there is that 5-page maximum. And at the LOI stage, the BioSketch is only needed for the applicant PI. Later on, we'll ask for more BioSketches, but just at the LOI stage. But that template is on Proposal Central as well.
So before we wrap up this section, just to clarify one more time, for the letters of intent, the clinical program has a 10-page limit, including references.
And the reason that's bigger is because you have to put a little semblance of a protocol. So that takes up a little bit more space.
And then the correlative, preclinical, and high-risk, high-impact programs have a 5-page maximum, including the references. Additionally, it is required to include all of the sections in the provided template on Proposal Central that we have copied in the document in the specific order for the LOI to be considered. So we take that very seriously. We want it to be very easy for our reviewers to understand. So we encourage you to, again, read the document, and the templates are available on Proposal Central in each LOI program for the specific program you're interested in. Okay. Before we move on, any questions? Feel free. Oh, we've got another question. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Yes, I have a question about those documents for those from foreign institutions. Like I'm from Canadian University. It said that we need to provide a proof that we're actually a charitable organization. So where will it be attached here? Which part?
Now,
So-
if you're at a university, that's
Oh, that's good enough. Okay,
yeah,
thank
yeah,
you,
yeah.
Dr.
I
Hall.
think it was a little confusing the way it was written, but no, that was mainly talking about non-university institutions. We understand that if you're at a university, that's fine. But it's just when you're really in a non-academic institute, let's say, and you just then need to prove that you are a not-for-profit organization that's looking to work on this. We don't ask that for universities.
And
Great.
those,
Thank you so much, Dr. Hellman.
if
Sure.
we need those documents, those would be requested past the full proposal in the contracting phase. So you don't need to submit them in the LOI or even the full proposal phase. It's more of ensure that your institute is a nonprofit organization.
And we just so you know, we are currently funding a project in a Canadian institution right now.
Any other questions before we carry on? We're wrapping up here shortly. Feel free to raise a hand, jump in the chat, anything at all. But before we jump into the Proposal Central walkthrough, we want to, since it seems like we have quite a few people who are unfamiliar with that program, I do want to mention that as of this week, the Osteosarcoma Institute has funded an additional $1.1 million in 3 projects. This morning, we actually released the article on our website, so I'm going to copy that in the chat in case anyone else is interested and want to see the updates. And I'm also going to take a moment and just encourage you to follow us on social media. We're on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, all of the fun things. And be sure to join our email list. If you have not already joined our email list, we have a specific spot on our website where you can join the email list and sign up as a researcher, and then you will be included in future emails that are relevant to this group of people about the scientific programs and our grant cycle and things of that nature. So those are some additional ways to stay connected to the Osteosarcoma Institute and learn more about the projects we're funding and things that we're doing throughout the year. And we hope that you get plugged in and just stay connected to us in that way. So we are very excited to announce Amy, will you send that to everyone? You just sent it to me. Thank you. We are very excited about the 3 additional programs or grants that we funded announced this morning. So be sure to check out that article. All right, let me switch my screen share here. Bear with me. You can go check out that article while I share.
As you're pulling that up, can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
So the if the letter of intent is selected to move forward, what does the grant proposal look like? I mean, some of these look like, the 5 pages, some of those, that's the size of a typical grant, or, so I'm just kind of curious what else the grant proposal would look like.
So the full proposal details are actually in the document on pages 10 for the clinical trials program, and then page 12 for the correlative, preclinical, and high risk, high impact. So the full proposal details are in the document we've been showing and sent in the chat. I just moved away from that screen, but it's on pages 10 and 12 if you're interested in what the full proposal will be requested.
Okay, great. Thanks.
You're welcome. All right, so as you can see, this is the Proposal Central website. I am also going to copy this and put it in the chat for your reference, trying to make this very easy for everyone. So if you do not have a profile, you're going to want to create a profile down here, an account, but I already have one. So we're going to sign in as an applicant or awardee. Then you're going to go to grant opportunities. This is all of the grant opportunities that are on Proposal Central. And so the easiest way to find ours are just typing in osteo. And here you will see the clinical trial, correlative science, high risk, high impact, and then the preclinical translational grant program. And this document will take you to our document we've been referencing and have shared in the chat. It's all right here for you. And then additionally, you can email us by clicking one of these links right here. Here are the details around the LOI deadline and the full proposal deadline, just to keep it front of mind. We're going to just walk through real quickly the preclinical translational program, especially because we have people who have never used this program before. So this is just a little bit about how it looks and what it looks like. We're not going to get very far because I'm not going to put in information, but as you can see, these sections match exactly what we had in the document.
All I see is Zoom. Or is that me? Maybe
I got it. I see it.
Okay, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was doing something else. Sorry.
Glad you said something. We want to make
Yeah,
sure everyone can see it.
Sorry about it.
Again, you can get our program guidelines document here, and you can reach out to us at the submissions email we've mentioned here. This is a very straightforward platform. We think it's very user-friendly. It's pretty basic. You just go through everything and answer the questions. We provide a lot of information and specify and reiterate the things that are actually in the instructions document. So again, read all the blue boxes, pay attention to all the little things on each page, because those match what is in the instructions document to give you additional guidance and to kind of clear up any confusion that there may be. So feel free to start this process. As Amy mentioned, only one LOI can be submitted per PI/applicant. We had someone ask a clarifying question about being a co-applicant and things of that nature, but one as the primary applicant. I think that's really all that's relevant for the full proposal, or excuse me, Proposal Central. I'm going to do one thing though. I have some fake proposals we're going to look at. So give me 1 second because I think this might help everyone. Here we go. Okay. So this right here is where you will find the information we've been referencing. The project description template is right here for you to download. That is identical to what is in the instruction document. The BioSketch template, and then again, the application instruction document is right here for you to review. So this section is going to be where you find the additional information that we've been referencing and the templates that you'll submit. Any questions about Proposal Central? Okay, we are doing a great job if we have no questions. Additionally, I want to say one more time, kind of like Dr. Hellman said, the Proposal Central support team is incredibly responsive during business hours. So if you're reaching out to them at midnight US time, they're not going to respond until the morning, but they are incredibly responsive, typically within an hour, especially if you're dealing with a technical issue or if something has gone wrong on the platform. we encourage you to reach out to them. We are happy to receive any questions or issues if you have a question about what to submit or a question on the instruction document, things of that nature. But if you're having a technical issue, reach out to Proposal Central. They will get to you very quickly. They're very professional and speedy in their responses. So I echo what Dr. Hellman said as well. So that wraps up this section. And I'll also show you this is the link that was included to our blog article about our new grant recipient. So I encourage you to check that out and save that to read later. All right, to wrap everything up, I will pass it back to all of you. If you have any questions, comments, anything, we've got about 10 minutes to answer anything that may have come up or be confusing. We want this to be helpful and the time is truly for you. So chime in the chat, raise your hand. We'll give everyone a minute to maybe think and make sure. All right, I'm taking silence.
And just, you know, there are always questions, but we're working hard to make it so you don't have to answer questions, but it's not like if you don't understand something, we won't answer.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr.
The whole idea of trying to, you know, talk to you and make it as clear as possible. Of course, there are just always questions, but so don't be afraid to ask questions, but, you know, make sure you read everything first is all we're trying to say. And, you know, if you have a question, that's fine.
I think that's a great note. So I guess, oh, Dr. Robertson, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Glad it was helpful. So before we wrap up, I do want to say one more thing that we've said 17 times. So I want to just make sure the deadline for letter of intent submissions is October 31st at 4 p.m. Eastern time on Proposal Central. It is required to include all of the sections in the provided templates in the specific order for your LOI to be considered. Be sure to read the entire grant cycle application instructions document and send us any additional questions that you may have. Yes, Dr. Hellman.
Let me just add one thing. We try to give feedback, right? So even on an LOI, you will get, if it's not selected, you'll get reasons that our reviewers. This is all reviewed by peers, and you'll get a document. And if you find you can, address those, there's no reason you couldn't resubmit. And in fact, if you do resubmit, we often look to see that you address the comments that were made in your previous LOI. And of course, if you are selected to submit a full proposal, you will have also received on your LOI some comments. And so we work hard because we try to give you all feedback that will try to make a proposal better the next time or better when you submit a full proposal to us.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot of work, but we really try hard to get you back feedback, to get you feedback in a reasonable period of time.
Thank you, Dr. Hellman. We hadn't mentioned that.
Yeah.
All right. Dr. Khanna, Dr. Hellman, Amy, anything else to add before we wrap up and give these lovely people 5 to 10 minutes back of their day?
Nothing for me. Thank you very much, everyone.
Nothing yet.
All right. Good luck. I hope you all send a LOI in.
We look forward to receiving your submissions and we greatly appreciate you joining us today. This recording will be posted on our Osteosarcoma Institute YouTube channel. So if you have a colleague that maybe missed it or you want to include someone else in this conversation or educate them about the submission process, this will be available in the next week or two on our YouTube channel. And then again, feel free to reach out with any additional questions that you may have. And when is the deadline of the letter of intent submissions? Anyone?
It's a quiz.
October 31st.
Good job.
Everybody.
Good job. All right. Thank you
Bye.
guys.
Okay.
Everyone
All
have
right,
a wonderful
bye-bye.
day.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.